Now we'd like to move on to our next session on virtual care and remote patient monitoring by Dr. Oommen John, Secretary at Asia Pacific Association for Medical Informatics. Dr. John is a physical researcher and digital health expert. He completed his MD in internal medicine from Christian Medical College and an executive MBA from IIM Calcutta. Dr. John has extensive field level experience in the area of designing, implementing, and evaluating innovative solutions and its applicability in health service delivery. He has served with WHO in immunization, strengthening, and vaccine delivery, research, and development. At George Institute for Global Health, he leads research initiatives evaluating the role of digital health interventions in improving clinical outcomes in chronic conditions. He serves on the expert advisory panel for the Market Access Program of National Health Authority India. Also, he serves as the secretary of the Asia Pacific Association for Medical Informatics and on the Scientific Advisory Committee at Foundation for Innovative Diagnostics. I would also like to thank George Institute for Global Health for becoming a knowledge partner at the HitLab Summit, and I would now like to hand over it to Dr. John. Please welcome Dr. John. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I share my slides?
Sure, Dr. John.
Could you confirm that you're able to see my slides?
Not yet.
Sorry. You're okay now?
Great. Okay.
So thank you for this opportunity. I really am grateful to HitLab and this Innovation Summit to having me here. And it's an honor and privilege to share with you about virtual care and remote patient monitoring in the era of augmented intelligence. And I'll just to upfront declare some of the interests. I serve on the executive of the Asia Pacific Society or Association of Medical Informatics on advisory boards of Commonwealth Center for Digital Health and I have consulting and engagements with WHO and Asian Development Bank, grant funding from these agencies. I have a scholarship and fellowship, and I understand that some of these areas which are funded might influence the interpretation and dissemination of research findings. However, I've tried to keep it as neutral as possible. So at the outset, I would like to share about.
Dr. John,
Yeah.
would you like to do a full screen?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
So I just taken us through the declarations of interest, and I'd like to devote the next 20 minutes or so to looking at what is the context of virtual care and what are the objectives of augmented clinical intelligence as we understand it, even with emerging and for frontier technologies. And I would delve a little bit into the principles and methodologies and some examples from our own practices, and also suggest on certain approaches in terms of what could be the road ahead for translation and scale up in the context of health systems in low and middle income countries specifically, because these are where these innovative technologies and innovations are maximally beneficial to improve outcomes. So I'd like to start with, so we all talking about virtual care and telemedicine in the context of the pandemic, and we've seen a lot of it acceleration, but I want to go back in time and see if at all there were opportunities or to have looked at virtual care and remote patient monitoring. So pay my tribute to two prominent political leaders, and they were senior members of the parliament who met with health events in the course of their life. And as you can see, Honorable Minister Jaitley had episode of breathlessness and restlessness, and he was rushed to the AIMS. And similarly, Dr. Swishma Saraj, she was again admitted to the ICU with a massive heart attack. And this happened in a span of about a couple of days apart in the same year. So earlier on, a couple of months before that, Minister Jaitley had tweeted saying that he was having kidney-related problems and certain infections that he was suffering from, and therefore he was getting admitted. And similarly, Dr. Sushma Swaraj had also uh, come out publicly and said that she had kidney failure and she was on dialysis. So what we see as these rushing to AIMS ICUs and presenting with breathlessness and restlessness, or being admitted with a massive heart attack, is perhaps just the tip of the iceberg. And if you were to look at the pathway to where they got this, if we really look at beneath the surface, we would discover that they had perhaps 20 or 30 years of long-standing diabetes, and perhaps even some other complications such as hyperlipidemia or metabolic syndromes. And then after a span of being on good treatment at the best of centers, they still happen to get chronic kidney disease and then finally succumb to cardiac events. We all know that chronic kidney disease and underlying diabetes and other metabolic conditions accelerate the progress to cardiovascular disease and have very severe and adverse outcomes in terms of cardiovascular outcomes in people who have these chronic conditions or non-communicable diseases as they're commonly labeled. So I would like to go back and examine this for all of us to consider. Could anything have been done better? These two prominent political leaders had the best of care, the best of advice, yet in the course of their life, they had to succumb to events that perhaps millions of other Indians and others across the globe are suffering from. Could anything have been done? Could technology have played a role? So for that, we have to really look beneath the surface and beyond the tip of the iceberg. And that's where we would like to see, do digital technologies or digital health interventions have a role to play in actually improving outcomes, enhancing the continuum of care, and having better outcomes, not only when they have developed a complication, but much, much earlier on when they actually get diagnosed with diabetes or hypertension or something like that. So the question that we had is, or the hypothesis that we were going to test is, would virtual care and remote management approaches improve outcomes in chronic condition, particularly in non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, and metabolic syndromes? And this project that I'm going to talk to you about is primarily aimed at developing a remote patient management system that is digitally enabled, that enables self-care, ensuring continuum of care in complex condition and people with multiple morbidities. As you would appreciate, many people who have one of these conditions tend to have multiple others. And in the current scenario of highly specialized institutes of excellence that are delivering care, you go to a nephrologist at one hospital, you go to a diabetologist at yet another, and you see your ophthalmologist is another center of excellence. And there is absolutely no way the data or the insights from all of these interactions actually get collated in one place and making meaningful mechanisms by which that data can be acted upon to actually improve outcomes. So our objectives were to develop and clinically validate, and based on context in which these are implemented, adapt these solutions and evaluate these models through clinical trials. And like I said, it was to develop a scalable remote patient management system that allows self-care. I want to underline and emphasize that it is all about self-care and ensuring the continuum of care in complex chronic conditions that have multiple components, and particularly in settings where that care is happening across different ecosystems. So in terms of a particular condition, because of the inspiration by the two prominent political leaders and well-respected leaders, we thought we will start with chronic kidney disease. And then we said, among people with chronic kidney disease, can we look at mechanisms by which we can identify pathways to improve their compliance to treatment, identify where are the areas that we can intervene. And we chose a modality that is home-based, and that is peritoneal dialysis. So we coined this project as a synonym called support PD, as in really supporting people who are on peritoneal dialysis. And the scientific expansion of that is seamless, user-centered, proactive provision of risk-stratified treatment in peritoneal dialysis. I'll come to the risk stratification and the explanation a little more, but then we need to keep in mind that risk stratification can be done by patients themselves or their close relatives or their immediate care providers, and providing them tools to do that can really improve outcomes. So in a nutshell, this is what we really aimed for. We wanted to have something that was person centric, with the person who is having that particular illness at the center of everything that we do. And there were several parameters in multimorbidity conditions such as chronic kidney disease. If somebody is having chronic kidney disease and end stage renal failure, they tend to usually have hypertension, which is either pre-existing or because of the kidney disease itself. And they would have, in many of them have underlying diabetes, which means that their blood glucoses need to be monitored fairly well. And people with renal failure tend to not tolerate hypoglycemia well, and also their blood sugars can fluctuate quite a bit. Therefore, monitoring that on a real-time basis or on regular basis is important. And people on peritoneal dialysis need to have their body weight measured, because your therapy is really dependent on the weight gain that you achieve or the weight loss that you achieve through the peritoneal dialysis itself. And we wanted to see, can we include interactive clinical questionnaires that the patient or their relatives answer, by which we can have clinical oversight about how they are doing on a day-to-day basis, and actually provide a virtual presence network. And having this amount of data that is generated from the participant or their close family settings, we are in a position to actually have alerts, alarms, and feedback nudges. And we can have bidirectional communication system. And specifically, we can look at predictive algorithms to look at complications and track them. And we could also implement remote patient management, including prescription management, algorithm-driven clinical decision support. So when we designed this project, it was not legal to be doing remote prescriptions or providing remote care, because there was no framework in terms of the legal framework for telemedicine practice or telehealth or virtual care delivery. Today, in the context of COVID, that has been COVID has been a blessing in one sense, because it has allowed the telemedicine practice guidelines to be released. And today we can practice many of these things which were only seen as a futuristic vision statement in our model. So then we're going on to seeing the outer cover. So if we were to look at the impact of these things, there is ability to provide the continuum of care while one is in the comfort of their home, and it can be extremely patient-centric, and we can ensure that the treatment and care delivery is guideline-based, because every step is measured and outcomes are measured against that. And there is significant cost reduction. In our own study, we have not been able to measure the cost effectiveness, which is ongoing, but in general, it is assumed, and models from elsewhere across the globe show that this is cost effective. So I will take you through an overview of what the workflow is like. So in terms of the peritoneal dialysis, every transaction is kind of mapped to an exchange. Exchange is where they introduce a fluid into their abdominal cavity through a tube, and that exchange is usually mapped as a particular instance. And so we try to map every exchange as the last interaction with the system. And during that, there was seamless ability to collect blood pressure, weight, and uh, by weighing the bags that were used for the peritoneal dialysis, we were able to look at the fluid that was going in and fluid that was coming out. And this did not cost too much of effort in terms of the cost either, because all you needed was a Bluetooth enabled blood pressure monitor, a Bluetooth enabled weighing machine. A weighing machine could do both the weight in terms of the weight of the participant before and after dialysis once a day or before each exchange, and it was highly customizable. We used to do an assessment of the participant and their preferences. If they prefer to have just one recording a day, then it could be tailored to one recording. If they wanted more frequent, you would do that. And you can change it at any point of time. If somebody is going into a fluid overload state and you want to measure it more frequently, you can do that. And all this can be done remotely. You don't have to do anything to the front end. That is the patient interface, which is on a mobile phone. And in terms of the vital signs, blood pressure, weight, and pulse could be recorded, and several other. You can record anything that you want, but we wanted to follow the minimalistic approach. And like I mentioned to you, with each of the participant who participated in this study or in this implementation, we were able to tailor it according to their context. What was practical for them, what were their requirements, and what did they really want to see as part of this. uh, I'd like to bring us to a question that is very, very critical to managing long-term illnesses or chronic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, chronic kidney disease. What actually influences health decisions, be it diabetes or hypertension? So quite often, as clinical practitioners and medical doctors, we tend to always put the blame on the participant or patient, saying that you are not taking care of yourself, you don't look after your sugars, you don't look after your blood pressure, why can't you do it? So what we also need to understand is that a long-standing diabetes that is poorly controlled, a long-standing hypertension that is not well managed, is the one that ends up after several years uh, as emergency admissions or ICU admissions or heart attacks. But what we also need to understand is that when we ask participants or patients to monitor their blood glucose level, such as what we commonly use nowadays is HbA1c or a 3-month reflective blood sugar and or blood pressure using digital blood pressure monitoring. To a patient, this is just a number. It doesn't make any other sense to them. So our question was that, can we link these numbers to reward and using the behavioral science principles, can we nudge them to making better decisions for the future by actually making those decisions in the present? So this was the basic principle by which we designed this whole application and this whole approach. And our underlying principle is that unless we are able to interpret these values of HbA1c of more than 6.5 or more than 140 millimeters of 140 over 90 millimeters of mercury at that time when they are seeing that value as a future event that they could be suffering from, you actually cannot influence the health decisions that they make on a day-to-day basis at that time point. So in order to do that, we had into the workflow embedded nudges. So when we knew that somebody was due for blood sugar, we would tell them 24 hours before that they need to have a blood sugar tested. And similarly, when they have their, if the sugars are out of control, then there are algorithms would ask them, prompt them to do it more frequently till that came into a controllable range. Similarly, when there was fluctuations in blood sugars or blood pressures or weights, they would be nudged gently with messages that would reinforce positive behavior or back onto the path of better control. So as you can see, this platform, this approach allowed us to provide insights that was needed. For example, somebody was going in for an infection, we could position the checklist automatically for them to be retrained in the procedures that are needed in the peritoneal dialysis, or we were able to remotely change the prescription of what they will be using in terms of the fluid, or we give them a comprehensive overview of their vital parameters that help them to make these decisions in a more informed manner. And showing these reports in a format that they are able to comprehend, and also giving them incentives by helping them adhere to the best practices in terms of closer they stay to the ideal body weight or ideal blood pressure, giving them rewards for that were primarily very, very instrumental in making sure they were compliant to the treatment protocols and the guidelines. So, like I said, we positioned questions that were highly interactive, that allowed us to capture whether they had any complications, pick these complications up very early in their stages, and then whenever they had a complication or an issue, they could always contact their regular healthcare provider, and we had clinical coordinators or support staff who again were both proactively reaching out to them as well as they're available on a call. So what is augmented intelligence here? So we were interested in looking at not the algorithms, not the ML, but we were particularly interested in looking at, can we include certain nudges within the workflow of a patient's daily life through which we can impact the decisions they make and improve outcomes. So one could go into very detailed aspects of the data science, but you could do it very simply by using simple rules-based engines as well. So in our case, because our interest is to document this and actually develop a model, we are continuously in the process of improving our algorithms and basically with self-learning models, as well as the improving on the adherence nudges. So what are we doing currently? We are evaluating this through a randomized control trial for looking at, can early interventions such as the nudges through artificial intelligence approaches in the patient application help improve disease management interventions. And in the future, we would like to see this embedded in clinical registries as well as in disease cohort. As you know, there is a national free dialysis program, there is a heart failure registry. Eventually, we would like to see patients who are part of these registries to be on these kind of platforms that enable them to be virtually monitored, have ability to self-manage themselves. And so what are the opportunities for augmented clinical intelligence in non-communicable diseases? So some of the challenges from the health system side or healthcare delivery side is that diseases like diabetes, hypertension are slow and insidious, and they have worsening of symptoms. The tasks are repetitive and monotonous, and compliance is extremely difficult, and care delivery is episodic. So if you have an augmented intelligence built into a system, you can have early warning systems, you can have interactive, engaging, and adaptive task scheduling, and rewards based engagement, and ensure the continuum of care. So in terms of implementation, we had undertaken stakeholder engagement. It was really a co-design approach, and we really used the principles of design thinking, and prototypes were developed and validated by several times across different types of setting: rural, urban, semi-urban, high income, low income settings. And these were translated into the so currently, we are in the process of implementing this in a high burden district, and we are gaining iterative feedback from users. And we are in the process of, we can't say that we are anywhere near advanced algorithms, but we are learning slowly. And we hope that we would be able to have validated algorithms for indicators of well-being and clinical outcomes, and we are establishing partnerships across the ecosystem. So just to give you an outline, when you talk about remote monitoring and virtual care, there are several protocols and several standards, and one particular working group of the ITU and Ministry of Telecom. This framework has been put out for anybody who is interested. They can look at it from the Ministry of Telecom website. So in terms of technology and protocols, there are plenty. They're all standardized, but in terms of implementing it in a specific clinical scenario, in a specific context, is something that we have tried to do, and we have been extremely successful in terms of implementing it. And we are constantly evaluating this, and we will be in a position to share the results soon when we have completed the trials. So going back to the question on how can augmented intelligence improve health outcomes. So we are working with the premise that within the health systems, we can actually use the principles of task shifting and decision support at the point of care. Here, it is not about clinical decision support by healthcare providers or clinicians alone, but providing decision support to actual patients, their relatives, and immediate caregivers who can make those simple decisions that can prevent large complications or huge bills that end up with if you end up in an ICU. So our approach is integrating learning health systems, thereby creating empowered citizens and allowing informed decision making regarding their own health, to own their health, as it were. So primarily the question here is, does nudging hold a promising key? And if so, what are the best ways of going about it? So thank you for this opportunity, and I'm done with my presentation. Happy to have discussions or take questions.